This podcast today is entitled Defeat Ends Through Learning.
Get ready for some positive, encouraging, inspiring information. But before we jump into this episode, I'd like to invite you to join this community to hear more episodes that will help you become healthier emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. All I want you to do is click on the subscribe button. We love your support, and it's incredible to see all your comments, and we're just getting started. I can't wait to go on this journey with you. Thank you so much for subscribing. It means the world to us.
Yeah. Welcome. This is podcast number 41 for us today. So welcome to what many of us refer to as Church on Saturday, right? So thank you for joining us online. Thank you for joining us in-house today. We're glad you came. This podcast today is entitled Defeat Ends Through Learning. Defeat Ends Through Learning. So today we are going to talk about a very empowering message that will encourage you to continue to improve and to have a positive outlook on your life as we sometimes go through life struggles. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, the podcast may feel a little different. I'm going to be reading some questions and then kind of, responding to those questions. And so, today's podcast is entitled Defeat Ends Through Learning. So what does that really mean? And this is what we have to understand. Defeat is not the end. It's a lesson. And this is what we have to understand, right? So we'll show you today how you can learn from your setbacks, right, to unlock success. And I think that's the key. When you think about defeat, a lot of times we think that that's just end. That's the end. I've been defeated. That doesn't mean that life is over. Life does go on, right? And so let's talk a little bit about failure, and let's talk a little bit about defeat through the questions. I want to ask some questions. First thing that we look at as well when we look at failure and defeat is that we look at Psalms 119:71. Psalms 119:71 says this: "It is good for me that I was afflicted, that I might learn your statutes." And so affliction can be a good thing. We can learn through it. But one of the good things about Psalms that I like is its personal perspective. What is your personal perspective when you fail? What is your personal perspective when you are defeated in anything that you do? Is it's good? This is good for me. Think about that. Because King David is the one who's kind of saying this, and he's really saying that it's good. It's good that this has happened. I don't know how many people realize sometimes when bad things happen to them, or, you feel like, something went wrong, that you immediately think, well, this was good. I mean, we say it in a sarcastic way, right? Like, well, this was great. This is really fun. But no, the reality is, what are we telling ourselves when we drop something? When, you make an entire cake and you're walking out the door and you drop it and it's like, what do we tell ourselves? Must have been some ingredient in that cake that was going to give someone an allergic reaction. This is good. You know what I mean? So it's learning from that, right? Here's the thing I want us to look at too. And as we talk about these questions today, one of the things is learning from Gideon. How many people are familiar with the story of Gideon, where he is called and he's the smallest tribe, the least of Israel is what he's telling God. And God is calling him to do a great thing for the whole nation of Israel. And so it's kind of interesting because when you think about it, when God is going to lead him to this place of victory, there are a couple of things that he had to deal with. There are a couple of things that they had to get out because there's only 300. Gideon's 300, right? There's only 300 that actually go to battle. And so what happens is we learn from Gideon and what he had to get rid of before he could get success or be successful. And not that I'm saying that you should get rid of people or you have to get people out of your life. I mean, sometimes that might be the case. But what I'm really saying is, what do we need to get out of us? So not that we're looking at it in terms of people, but in us, what do we need to get rid of? And so the first thing I think that we look at when we're looking at the story of Gideon is that we need to get rid of what we call the fearful mindset. The fearful mindset. And so what God said to Gideon is that let all the cowards, let all the fearful, let them go home first. In fact, it went down to like 10,000 very quick. You know what I mean? So a lot of people left. And so the first thing when you're dealing with yourself and you're dealing with defeat is you have to get over this concept of, I'm cursed, or this concept of nothing ever works out for me. And although all of those are just fearful mindsets, honestly, just being fearful. And then it makes you not even try. So the first thing you got to get rid of is the fearful mindset. Not necessarily, sometimes it's people, but I'm not talking about people specifically. I'm talking about within us. Do we have this sort of fearful mindset internally? The second thing is, when we look at Gideon, is the oblivious mindset, right? One of the things was when they were still like 10,000 people or so, God takes them down to the water and he tells them to drink. And many people just drank and forgot that they were even supposed to stay on guard and watch for the enemy. And there were only 300 that literally, when they drank and satiated themselves, they were still continually watching. So we have to also get rid of what I call the oblivious mindset. And it's this mindset of just being oblivious to what's going on, that we are not in a position to really learn from our defeat or learn from our failure. And so this is kind of important. Here's what Proverbs 4:7 says. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, though it costs you all you have, get understanding. And I want you to think about that. Like, though it costs you every penny, get it. That's how important wisdom is, right? Getting that clarity and getting that understanding. And then here's another one before we get into the questions today. Here's another one. We can also learn from Nehemiah. And I think it's interesting to learn from Nehemiah in this way. Nehemiah kind of is like praying and seeking God, and he fasts for about 4 months or so, and he's really seeking purpose in his life. And so his purpose becomes rebuilding the wall to Jerusalem. And so as he does this, there's some obstacles. But here's the first thing that we understand about what we need to do and what we learn from Nehemiah. It is the willing worker mindset, the willing worker mindset. This is something very important, because the Bible does say this. It says, if you're willing and obedient, you shall eat the good of the land. But a willing worker, a lot of times we may do work, but we're not willing to do that work. We don't really willing. All that means is that my motivation is in it. Like, no, I'm looking forward to it. If your heart's not in it, you're not going to be willing to sit there for a while and accomplish what needs to be accomplished. So your heart has to be in something. You understand that? So having that willing worker mindset is kind of key. And Nehemiah kind of has that. He develops that. But here's the other thing that you need as well. It is the willing warrior mindset. The willing warrior. A lot of times we think because I'm trying that everything should be easy. Well, look, I'm trying here, so I wish the enemy would just leave me alone. It doesn't really work that way. While you work, you have to also be ready to fight. So it's like, even in the process, I need to also fight for time. Fight for my time to be there, to be able to do what needs to be done. So there's also that concept as well. A lot of times we feel like, well, I'm willing to do this. I'm trying to do this. And sometimes we're like, I'm trying to do this thing for God. So we think that everything is supposed to be easy because you're trying to do something for the Lord or do something for God, when in fact, no, you need to also have a warrior mindset. That even in the process, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to give up. And if the enemy attacks me, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to have my bow and arrow in one hand and my working tool in the other. And I'm going to be able to build, but also have a mindset of the enemy doesn't want me to build what I'm building. Do you understand that? And so having that mindset is kind of important. So as we talk about this title today, right? Defeat ends through learning. I'm going to talk about a couple of questions. Like I said, this might feel a little different. So my first question that I want to kind of dive into and an answer is, how can we shift our mindset to view defeat as a learning opportunity? And as we think about that, shifting our mindset starts with recognizing that failure is not a reflection of your worth. A lot of times when you fail, you think that that's you, like, I'm not good enough, or whatever that might be. But failure is not a reflection of your worth, but rather it is an essential part of growth. You have to understand that failure is a very essential part of growth. We must choose to see setbacks as feedback. It's not the end of the world, right? And so it really helps us redefine our approach to the situation, right? So let's start over. Let me redefine this. Let me see what is a better route that I can take, right? By accepting that defeat is temporary and essentially for learning, that's what defeat is. It's for your learning, right? We can train ourselves to embrace challenges with curiosity rather than fear. All right? Here's another question, which is, what are practical ways to identify the lessons in our failures, right? So what are some practical ways? And one of the most practical way, and I'm big in this, not as I got here, I guess as you get older, things change in your life. But I'm big on this now, which is one practical way to reflect on your experiences is through journaling. When something has gone wrong in your life, when you know you've gotten off the path of purpose or where you need to be at in life, one thing is to journal that and think about the processes. How did I get there? And then here's the key. If you write down in detail how you went astray, you'll notice that when you began to go astray the next time, that if you read your journal, that you'll be able to see some of the same habits creeping back in. You'll be able to identify that, wow, this is what I'm doing right now today. Like, okay, I stopped praying, or okay, I stopped talking to people who were a part of a positive community, or whatever that might be. You understand what I'm saying? You could start to see the same patterns and things like that. So that's kind of very important, right? That we journal and that and here's another thing. If you have any trusted friends, sometimes they'll help you as well. When you have people that you can really, they're not going to sugarcoat things for you. I think a lot of times our best friends are the ones that sugarcoat things for us, but our better friends are the ones that don't, right? And so think about that a little bit. So here's another question. How do we handle the emotional impact of defeat while still focusing on growth? Because defeat can be emotional. I could just tell you that when something doesn't come out right, it almost brings on this mindset of, I just want to give up. I want to quit. But think about this. Handling the emotional impact requires self-compassion. Self-compassion. The emotional impact of failure, you have to have a little bit of self-compassion. And I think that sometimes we lack that. Sometimes we're hard on ourselves. We beat ourselves up, right? And I think we're our worst critic. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but we are our own worst critic. And so sometimes it's important to practice a little self-compassion. It's okay to feel disappointed and frustrated, but it's important not to dwell on those emotions, okay? And so that's the thing that we have to understand, is that you have to control what you can control, which is maybe you can't control the situation, but you can control your response to that situation, right? So practicing mindfulness or prayer can help ground you. Honestly, it can help ground you, keeping you centered as you navigate through these emotions, all right? Here's another question. What are common mistakes people make when faced with defeat? And how, of course, this is great, and how can learning prevent those mistakes? A common mistake is giving up too quickly, right? Work ethic is everything, but a common mistake is giving up too quickly. And like I said, when things don't come out, my first thing is throw in the towel. Like, man, let's throw in the towel. But that's not going to create a growth mindset. Another is blaming external factors without considering what we could do differently. Think about that, right? So learning prevents these mistakes by encouraging self-awareness and perseverance. When we focus on what we can learn, we're more likely to adopt a growth mindset, right? Here's a Bible verse that's very important. Matthew chapter 7, verse 3-5. It says this right here. It says, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust that is in your brother's eye and pay no attention of the plank that is in your own eyes?" And I love that, because what the Messiah is really saying is that we should always have sort of a personal reflection of how we can do things better. right? How can we get better? How can I grow, right? I guess I'm someone that I don't leave well enough alone. Do you know what I mean? Like when I say I don't leave well enough alone, it means that this is the best way to take what I'm saying. Just because I finished the first grade doesn't mean that I'm content with finishing the first grade and I don't want to advance to the second grade. That's what I mean by I don't leave well enough alone. So well enough is that, yeah, I graduated the first grade. That's well enough. You finished. Let my education be over from there. When no, that's not how I think. It goes back to the Bible verse that we read about wisdom and getting wisdom. It becomes sort of a very important thing. So I want you to kind of think about that. Not leaving well enough alone. Can I improve this? Can I get better? And I think I asked that question of myself, and I think that's why this podcast is really is entitled, really, Something Has to Change. And the thing that really needs to change is constant self. Self needs to be in a state of constant growth and constant change and constant evolution, right? We should never become stagnant. We don't want to become set in our ways. We don't want to become these people who cannot learn or cannot grow anymore, right? And so that becomes a very important thing. So here's another question. How does embracing a learning mindset affect long-term success? And this is important because embracing a learning mindset leads to a long-term success because it fosters resilience. If you can embrace through your defeat that I am just here to learn, okay? I'm encouraging you. Don't leave well enough alone. Don't just be happy with the status quo. Do you know what I mean? Push to evolve. Here's another one. All right, here's another point. So how do you maintain motivation, right, and hope during repeated failures, right? Like you keep failing at something. You keep burning the roast. You keep burning the chicken or whatever that might be or whatever you might be experiencing, right? Maintaining motivation comes from remembering your why, okay? The deeper purpose behind your actions. That's your why, right? I also celebrate small wins. It's very important to understand that. Even in the midst of failure. I'm going for the big picture, but sometimes I have to celebrate the tiny wins along the way to get to the big picture. Are you with me on that, guys? And so each step forward, no matter how small, reinforces the belief that progress is being made. And that's the thing we have to understand. So surrounding yourself with a support system can also help you stay motivated as well. So here's the thing that you look at is that sometimes you just need someone positive in your circle, right? So just imagine the husband outside working on the car. And, the wife's like, you need to take that to a mechanic. And he's like, no, I'm going to find it. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to make it right. And so imagine the wife just poking her head in and out every, couple hours. And you shaking your head, grease all over your body, all over your head. And you're shaking your head like, oh, my gosh, I just don't know what's wrong with it. And she's like, I told you, you should take it to a mechanic. So sometimes you don't need that kind of thing in your life, right? Sometimes you need the opposite. You might need, honey, you can do it. Keep at it, baby. I know you could do it. If you said that this is what you want to do, keep pushing forward and you can make it, right? It's that reinforcing that positive support that it can be done and you can do it. Just keep challenging yourself. Keep pushing forward, right? So here's another question. Here we go. What role does humility play in learning from defeat? Because you have to realize that humility plays a good role when it comes to learning from defeat. Humility is crucial because it allows us to admit that we don't have all the answers and we are also open for growth, okay? It frees us from pride and ego, which can keep us stuck in the same patterns, right? By accepting that we can always learn something new, we position ourselves to gain wisdom from every situation, no matter how difficult. Humility is important. And I think that humility is the thing that we realize that we do need to learn and that we do need to learn and grow. Here's the thing that I think is wonderful that Proverbs 22:4 says. It says, the reward for humility and fear of the Lord is riches and honor and life. Think about that. That's a very good scripture to understand, right? The reward for humility and the fear of the Lord is riches and honor and life. It's kind of important to understand it. Always just remain humble and don't be afraid to ask for someone's opinion or ask for help, because it really removes the ego and the pride and you being stuck in your same kind of system and things like that. You see? The second to the last question is this right here. How can faith and spiritual practices help in transforming defeat into a learning experience, right? Faith teaches us that setbacks are not the end of the road, but part of the greater plan. It's very important to understand that through prayer, meditation, and reflection, that we can gain perspective that our struggles are shaping us to become stronger individuals, right? Here's one of the things that I look at. James 1, 2 through 4. And of course, we wrote a whole song about this, right? But it says, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing." So it is that you won't pull your hair out, right? You won't beat yourself up. You'll realize that through the defeats that come along or failures that come along with life, this just presents an opportunity to get better, So it's very important that we understand, right? These practices provide comfort and guidance, reminding us that we are not alone on our journey, and that there is a higher purpose in everything. There's a higher purpose in everything. And sometimes your defeat is not that God doesn't want you to have it. And one of the things I always say is Moses not going into the promised land was not because God did not want him to go into the promised land. So you have to recognize that sometimes your failure or defeat is not a sign from God saying, "I don't want you to do this." Then you're going to be like the Stevie Wonder song, "Very superstitious, writing on the wall." And it's not necessarily true. Sometimes you can fail because we don't internally reflect. Okay? So the last question is this right here. Are there specific strategies or tools for turning challenges into teachable moments? And of course, yes, right? One effective strategy is using the 5 why techniques, which involve asking why, like questioning why. Why did this happen? How did we get here, right? 5 times to get to the root cause of the problem. So you ask this over and over again. Why? And I don't know about you, but I feel like when we were children, we asked why more often, right? To the point where, the parents just ran out of, "'cause I say it so." It just ran out of answers, right? But you constantly are asking and questioning why? How did this happen? Why did this happen? Is going to be very important to your success. So I have one takeaway today. And the takeaway is that don't become discouraged the next time you experience defeat or failure in any aspect of your life. Realize that those things are only there to help you heighten your awareness and become better. That's all I got, guys. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you guys for joining us today.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching and being a part of this community. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. You're going to get weekly videos on building a growth mindset, cultivating grit, and unlocking your full potential.